Good morning. Thank you for being on time. Are you fresh? Yeah, great. All right, let's get this thing started. My name is Claus Lavendt. I'm from Denmark. I have a company called Data Manics, and probably not many of you know me, but I'm a little bit creative, and I like to be excited about things. So hopefully I can get you excited about this topic as well. So, what's in it for you? This session is meant to be an inspiration, so maybe you can think a little bit different at your next project. I will show some real-world examples, 3 of them, and we will look into the codes, but you won't get any demo files. So that's in it for you. So what are we gonna cover? Why, what, why, and how? And then we are gonna dig into real-world examples. Okay? You're following so long? All right, good. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about being creative with the toolset we already have in FileMaker. Oh, by the way, this is FileMaker, if someone didn't know. All right. So what we are going to look at is using views, some JavaScript, some HTML, CSS, SVG, and calculations. So it should be something that you already know about. And some of it is actually pretty simple. And it's about letting your users visually see data, right? So you can look at spreadsheet view, or Robert showed yesterday the spreadsheet view of a table, which is nice for people who love to look at tables and columns and rows. But sometimes it would be nicer to see stuff more visually and compare it to something that is going on in the real world. And it should be a joy to use your app. So make it beautiful and make something that is more relative to what they are doing in the real world. And that could be a ton of different things, depending on what the business is. So, why should we do this? So what if we should describe, okay, this is an example. I admit this might be a little bit over the top, but just to make the point. So let's use some words to describe something that could be just as well be in your app, okay? Are you with me? Okay, so now I'm going to describe something that you all know what is. And then when I have described it, let's see if you know what I'm talking about. All right? Okay, so it's a thing. Sometimes you see it by itself. Sometimes you see it with others. Not always the same type. It's something that you use every day. Most people at least use it every day. That is, most adults at least. Sometimes kids use it as well. It's on a wall. Well, some are in a box, on a box or in a box. Normally it's inside, at least when it's not outside. You have many in your home. Well, depending on the size of your home, it can be dangerous. In fact, it can kill you. But it's also something that you need for making dinner. I would if I'm making anything with meat, also much for vegetables. You often need it if it's something, if you want to see something. You definitely need it when watching TV, mostly, unless you have a special TV. You would use it if you have long hair, that is, after taking a shower. These days, it's expensive to use. So, you all know what I'm talking about, right? That was a clear, small description, right? No? No? A power outlet, right? You use it every day. So why, if you just put a picture, everyone knows what we are talking about, right? So that was my point. Okay, maybe a little bit over the top, but you get my point, right? So It should be a joy to use your app. That's the second time I'm stating that. Because if it's easy to use the app, you get better data quality. And better data quality makes your app much more relevant, and it makes it much more useful for the company, the department that you are working for. And not all users are data people. Not all users are office people who likes to sit and look at spreadsheets or something that looks like that. Okay? So it's important to make it easy to work in your app. And I actually don't like the word app, but because it's so much more that we are doing, right? So how should we go around that? Identify use cases. Look at the app and see where can I do something different in order to visualize what we are talking about, what the data are. And for God's sake, keep it simple, right? And don't overuse this technique or these techniques. And then, yeah, determine which method to go with it, and also be aware that sometimes native FileMaker is just the best tool. Okay, so you probably guessed that it has something to do with HTML and CSS, and FileMaker Perform Script with Option is the key things here. And then scripts and calculations behind the scenes to make it really work. So in the web viewer, the magic really happens with the interaction with the new FileMaker Perform Script with Option. Probably, how many have used that? Okay, a lot, okay. How many have used the FMP URL protocol? Right, okay, good. So that was what we used before, where we made a call to the operating system to go outside FileMaker and go back inside FileMaker and call a script. And now we have this native JavaScript that is option. JavaScript option? No, it's just a JavaScript that is embedded in the web viewer, so that we can call that script and call into FileMaker and run a script. That is doing the magic with the interaction. The great thing about this is that it can be called from standard HTML. So even if you don't know anything about JavaScript or how to write a JavaScript code, this is so dead simple to use. I just given an example here. It's a div tag, which most probably have seen looking at some HTML code, right? Everyone has seen that, right? Okay, good. If I'm going over something that you need me to explain a little bit better, please speak up, because now I'm just assuming that everyone know what I'm talking about, and maybe you're not. Okay, so don't be afraid to say that. But it's just a div tag. I'm going to get back to this example where I put in an ID, but basically you say on click. So when you click, run this script with a script name and some options. So that's the magic. And then on the FileMaker side, the magic is using while loops or substitute or a script loop. So this is something we know, right? And even though the while function is relatively new, it's a great way to challenge yourself building new, working with this code and building new things with it. And of course, there's many other ways as well. All right. You still following along? No one sleeping? No? Good. Great. So the first example here is a real-world example. It was too complex for FileMaker alone, so we went on and combined the power of FileMaker with the simplicity of HTML and CSS. So the example is a work schedule for events where we have some people that should work in bars at this event, and some had other functions than working in a bar. So we need to create the work schedule for this event and show who is working at which bar and at which function, right? That sounds relatively simple. But let's have a look at how this works. 2 seconds. Right, and into FileMaker, right. Okay, so, and on purpose, I chose a very ugly layout setup, but we have a band playing. It was on 1st of November 2020, starting at 8. So we have a list of people here, right? Spreadsheet view. Some of them are bartenders. For the bartenders, they had a location for, this is in Danish, sorry, but the bartenders have a location, and some of the other functions are like the cleaners that are making sure everything is nice, or in the cloakroom, or security, or ticket, or stage technicians. And then we have some people here who are not active, I think, or not on the schedule, but they wanted to do that, and other stuff. All right. So it's really not a good view of what the hell is going on at this event, right? So actually, first we started doing it natively in FileMaker, which looked very much like this. So so we had this view, what's it called? Crosstab report. I think it has been used like that. All right, so we have the list of people, and on the rows we can see there's a bunch of bars, and then on the outside we have some functionality, and then we have some special stuff here because sometimes they sign up for a shift and then they need to change that or switch it with another person, right? And we need to know who have switched and so on, and had to be approved. But building this in FileMaker on a portal, and I should say that this event takes place in some venues that are across a house, so we have many bars. Some other events only have 2 bars, so it's a variable number of bars, and that's all the way to to this line where this massive block is, right? So that's a variable number depending on which of the rooms were in use. So I had to group several objects there and conditionally hide depending on the rooms in order to show the number of columns that were needed. Okay, that was the first challenge. So we had many objects, and not only that, but as you can see, there's a colored block here. So I need to have conditional coloring, right? Conditional formatting with the color, even though it was green or yellow or white. And then if it was marked with green, then it should have the time where they need to show up at work inside. Okay, so you can see there's actually a lot going on a portal, right? And not only that, but we also needed to put these lines in to say, okay, the top block, they are bartenders. The next block are the next function, and the next function, and the next function, and the next function, and below are those who didn't work. Okay, so it's actually a lot of calculation going on inside FileMaker, and it was really killing the system. So we went another way of doing it, and the way we did with this was I literally ripped out 2 of the tables, the event table and not the people table, but there's a relation table that sit between, what's it? Join table. Thank you for helping me. And I ripped out those two tables into a file in order to play around with it, so I didn't mess up any stuff in the real system, which I did here. And then try to rebuild the relationships. And well, actually, there's just a simple relationship between. Okay, simple, almost simple, right? So between the event table and let me see if I can. No. Where's that function? Okay. Can we zoom? Yes. Okay. So basically, there's the event table and the relationship table. Oh, no, it's here. Yeah, it's actually just a very simple relationship. This was what ended up being used for this. Okay. And then I looked at it. Okay, so breaking it down, every line is a related record in the join table. Okay, so we have a person, and at some point over here there needs to be a green block or a yellow block or with a number in and so on, and it should be related to one of the functions or the bars. So basically the minimum part of this example is the line with the person. So I knew that I needed to do something, and this is just HTML, so it's really simple, but I needed to define the HTML for each line. So in order to make that as simple as possible, I went down and did it in this field, okay? And let's have a look at that. This is the row, okay? That is actually in there. And there's, let me zoom a little bit. Is that okay? You can see it? All right. So I like to plug it together so it's easier to see. But basically, each line is for each row in the chart. Each row, well, it's still a single line, but each row in that line for that person. This is Casper, I think. Yeah, Casper, that's the name. So the first part up here, the ID was a combination of the name and the pipe, and then the UUID for this record. So this join record, that's the ID. And this is really nice with the HTML because it has a tag saying ID, and it's supposed to be unique. It doesn't complain if it's not unique, but it's supposed to be. So that's why I'm combining this, okay? And then there's some classes on, and these classes are depending on the styling that we want. So writing a little bit of CSS, you just put on the classes. And when I say classes, is because you can have multiply classes on each object, right? Just with a space in between. So you can add more classes, which is really nice in this example. And then we have the onClick here, right? And FileMaker perform script with option. I have the script name here. And then I have the script parameter, which is a nice little thing saying this ID. So for this object that I'm clicking on, I'm taking the ID and passing as a script parameter. And that's why I'm using the ID tag of the object here. So that will come in as a script parameter saying, okay, it's the name. I clicked on the name, and something needs to happen when you click on the name compared to if you click on one of the bars. And these bars have, well, 11.1, 11.2, and so on. That's just specific for this solution, so don't think too much about that. Could be the name of the bar or whatever. It's just to have it as a script parameter so that you can grab it in the script and do an action based on that. Okay? And as you can see, this was Casper, and looking back, I think, where is Casper? He was, of course, not the first one. There, yeah. So here's Casper. Name, yeah. So here's Casper, and yeah, he's stage technician. There, and you can see that's over to the right side, which is right here saying, okay, so we are applying the classes DM green, meaning that it is green, and then there could be a time normally here if he had a start time. Okay, simple enough. And then some icons and so on. So this is the row, and I simply put that into the field here. It's an auto-enter field. Sorry. Which is here, my row. We love this, right? Yeah. This is the calculation. And this is pure FileMaker, right? So it's so nice to go in here. Let me see. No, I can't do that. Sorry, Christian, I haven't activated your plugin apparently for this. All right. So I'm building a lit, and I have a trigger. I don't know how much in detail I'm going to go in here, but just explain very simply what the triggers are. Some is very specific for this solution, right? So there's a trigger field. We have some. We have a JSON that is having some setups about how many bars are there in this event and so on, blah blah blah, and through a relationship if they are if I'm last. So for the line that we needed to do below. But basically, we are taking here a div tag, right? So you can see the div ID, and then I'm just putting in some sort of merge field or merge code that I can replace later on with a substitute. So that's basically it. So the column number, the relation, the ID, the class here, and the color is replaced with the class that it should be, and so on, blah, 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 on click, and so on. And the nice thing about using this ID is that I've just spent some time creating the ID of this object in the start, and then I'm just referring to it. So I can just, the last part, on click, it's just the same all over. I can just repeat that. And another merge variable here, right? And then I'm gonna go down here. I'm using a while where I am taking out some stuff. This is actually much more complicated than it has to be. That it's just because of the specific solution here. So I'm just doing a while where I'm building up the rows and what the names are based on some other stuff. If you don't need to have variable number of rows, it would be even much easier, right? But just to say, this is just while, and it's just setting up in a let statement. So we are building up, so this block and this block and this block, and then we are just combining it at the end with the substitute of the different merged variables that I've put in. Okay, easy enough, right? And it's so fun because you can challenge yourself with the while functions and other stuff. And the nice thing about having it as an auto-enter calculation is that you can trigger it to update whenever you need it to, right? So the other thing we do is that, is it here? No, sorry, maybe here, yeah. In this case, I'm actually combining everything into a full HTML in a field that I'm referring to in the web viewer. So everything is combined here, which means that I need to update this field whenever I make a change in any of the rows or adding new people or taking people off. But that's something that could be handled easily, right? You could also combine it. But doing it live where you have the main block on the event and then you just relate on the fly, that will be too slow, is my experience. Okay, and how does it look? It's really, okay, so this is the configuration. It's just a JSON that gives some configuration stuff for building up the columns. It's not that interesting. But the full HTML is fairly simple, a little bit of CSS, and then you have the div classes, and that's the header, basically, we're building here, and then here comes all the lines, all the people down there, and nicely separated with the, these hash lines. Okay, so simple enough, right? Okay? Right. Great. All right. And the great thing here is that this is working really fast. And as you can see, it's really fast whenever I click anywhere in the web viewer. Okay? So, no. Let's go back. Okay. Are you bored so far? Okay. So another approach is... You'll let me know. Thank you. Thank you, Albert. So another approach is to use SVG, which is actually not what I write here, scalable vector graphics. It's screen vector graphics, because vector is scalable, because it's just numbers. Everyone know what SVG is, right? Okay. Have you played with it under the hood? Yeah, all right. It looks like HTML, which is really nice. So this icon I have over up here is basically just, I can't mark it up, right? So it's basically just a bunch of numbers that describe how this object should be drawn, right? And you can stretch it out and do everything with it. But look at it, it's tags. So it's a G tag, yeah, whatever. It looks like HTML, and it, for a long part, it works like HTML. Which means that we can go in and put some of the stuff that we did with the HTML and put it in here. We can put classes in, actually. It's not everything that is supported for SVG in a class, so not all styling you can do with the CSS can work here, but some can't. And we can do some other stuff with clicking as well. All right, so the next example is DevCon to Go, which was an app I created for the American DevCon some years ago. And it's a big conference with many session rooms, and in order to navigate around those session rooms, we need to have some mapping there. So there's basically two sides of this. We have the overview map that is telling where are we, where are the sessions, because not everywhere. And then from a session, you could click and say, hey, I would like to go to Albert's session. Where the hell is that? And you click on that, and you get the other map where we have marked with a red that, yeah, here is the session. Okay? So that was the idea. It's a little bit different here because I'm using SVG and also using an image beneath it. But the great thing is that we can layer stuff here. Okay? And it's not that complicated. The trick here is, maybe, I don't know if it's easy to see, but you can put display equal none. So basically, I just put in the red boxes everywhere on the map, and I just set it to display none. And if I need to display one of them, I go in with FileMaker functions and say, okay, I'm gonna remove that display none for this object, and then it will show. So actually, dead simple. And a few classes that is supported, not as I said, not all attributes of the CSS is supported. But here it's just called diffs and style. Okay, yeah, it looks still much like HTML. It's a little bit different, but other than that, it is the same. And you saw the icon that consists of a bunch of numbers to describe that icon. But if it's just a square, it's so easy because you say, where is the x and y axis? What's the width? What's the height? That's it. And the great thing about that is that you can just nudge around and just change the number a little bit. Is it fitting better now or not? So that's one of the simple things. So let's take a look at that. Yeah. Okay. You see it. Let me just put down here. All right. So here we have the map, and because it's layered here, I already have the image. Okay, maybe I should show that. It's not here. Sorry. Must be down here. Seconds. Where? Aha. Really? No. Okay. Anyway, the great thing about images is that you can convert it into a base 64. And a base 64 can be a background image in HTML. So what I did is basically take the image from a container field, convert it to base 64, and use it as a background image for the HTML. So there's the first layer. And then put SVG tags on top of that. And since it's just some squares here, it's nice that rooms normally are square, it's easy to describe with a width and a height and X and Y. So that's what I'm doing here. And yeah, so this is the, let me just zoom a little bit here. So for each of the rooms here, I give it an ID, I have on click, and as you can see here, this is nothing new. At that time, we didn't have perform FileMaker script with option. No, we were using the FMP URL protocol. But it works exactly the same way, just you don't have to go outside, okay? So, we have the square, and then we have the, what's the other stuff here? Yeah, that's actually the object where we are naming it with 5 in this case, and then when you click on it, you can do an action. So for example, here I can click on the room and say, what is going on in this room? And then you get the list of sessions that is going on at that room. Or I could go and say, I want to go to Clay session. That sounds really interesting. Where is that? And I can click and go to the map here, where I'm just displaying it. Okay, pretty simple. Right? You're still awake? You're still silent. Yeah, but the great thing is that it is really simple, and it's something you can do with calculations, right? And the stuff that you already know. So it's pretty simple still. Yeah, this is more visual, right? Yeah, so it's more visual than saying, okay, I need to go to Texas B. Where is Texas B, right? So it's much easier when I can see it on a map, right? So it's much more friendly to look at and feel what's going on. So that's really my point, and my point is that this is dead simple. It's not complicated. which means that you shouldn't think too long before you jump in and start doing this in your apps. Okay? In this example, I'm actually using two different web viewers. As you can see, when I go in, okay, so I go into the map here. Oh, you can't see that. Okay, it is two different web viewers, and that was just because it was easier and I didn't have to do too many calculations. So I'm using two different web viewers. I use the same ground map as a background image, and I have the same SVG, basically because I've made all the drawings on that. But when I go in from the map and say, okay, we are not at any room, I can just click a room and say, I want to go there. That's one web viewer. And then when I go from a session and say, I want to highlight any of the one of the rooms, I go to a specific location record, and that's, you can see there's 31 locations in this one. And on that location, I'm loading the SVG that says display none, which is not none, but it is the other than none, right? So it's displaying, yeah. So that's basically it, and that was just for convenience or to make it simple. And also for making it simple to dig into this solution, just steal that technique, right? I don't know, maybe some of you have this file. It has been offered for free, and if you really want it and don't have it, I'm not sure you can get it from FileMaker or Claris anymore, but you can send me an email and I can send it to you. It's unlocked. Okay? So that was 2 out of 3. I don't know, Philip, could you get me some water? Thanks. All right. Yeah, you're not saying that much. Is there any questions? No? Yeah?
1 sec.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. On your first example on the scheduling system,
Yeah.
have you, out of interest, because obviously there's a limited amount of data on there, I fully appreciate your original approach. We've all been there, everything from global fields across the top, and we've had those horrible things that take forever to refresh, particularly over a cloud-based server. Have you checked the scalability of that approach of using the div tags within the HTML over, say, 1,000 records or 10,000 records to see what the performance is? And the second part to that is, if not, then we also need to consider a JavaScript-based scheduling system, which is a project we have to do ourselves soon. So it's quite interesting to see it. So really, it's just, have you out of interest created a lot of records to see what the performance is like?
Yeah, no, I think the biggest events have around 100 people there in this case. It's also a matter of, we could go to other scheduling systems, but they wouldn't fit completely because in this use case is special because they have this variable number of bars depending on blah, 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 and there's much going on, right? So that's why it made sense to build it inside. But the performance is really fast because it's loading a HTML from a field. It's a fully fledged HTML from a field. If I wanted better performance, I could take that HTML and put it on a web server, right? And just load it directly from a web server. That would be possible. But then I would have to deal with that web server and lock down so nobody else could see it and so on, blah, 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 and then updating and stuff like that.
I appreciate that. I'm just really interested in the scalability because we have an old reactor-based system where we have to interact with FileMaker, and it's a scheduling system. You drag things on and you move them around. It's like we do in Calendar, that type of thing. But it grinds to a halt when it gets to thousands of records. In our case, it's fitters vans, and scheduling deliveries and things like that. So.
Sure. But that's, I mean, we have done it with calendars where we have, maybe 1,000 events or something that is loaded, but it works pretty fast. And we are doing that related. But again, put your FileMaker skills at work here and see, narrow tables, not too much going on. Don't index the field that is containing a lot of data that you don't need to index and so on. That makes everything faster. So there's a ton of stuff you can do natively with FileMaker to optimize. And those skill sets are just the same here. Yeah, it's pretty simple, right? Yeah. All right. No, but I mean, we all have skill sets in FileMaker. That's the nice thing about this. It's just using the same tools, just a little bit different. All right. So, yeah. The third example from the real world is a customer of us that are building windmill towers. And nowadays, they are building a lot of windmills so we can get some green energy. But building a tower for a windmill is, it sounds a little bit, how hard can that be? Pretty hard, I would say, right? And that's the thing, there's so much going on with this stuff. So basically, when you build a windmill tower, you start with some giant steel plates, you wrap them and weld them. So you have a wrap, and then all the wraps are welded together, and then you have a section. And then there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that nothing is really simple, even if I claim that it is simple. But going into how hard can that be? Well, pretty hard. So when you have a wrap that is 7 meter in diameter, it's a pretty big steel plate, and you have to weld it together. And not only that, but the welding has a tolerance of 1%. So the angle of the welding must be within 1%, which is crazy on an object that is a steel plate that is 7 meter in diameter. And because they are, of course, ISO certified, they require a lot of documentation. So every single thing needs to be documented. And here's the challenge that these welders, the people who are working with this, they are really not office people. That's why they got a job working in the production, right? So they didn't have to sit in front of a computer. But we have the challenge that we need to input documentation and numbers and stuff like that, and these welders needs to input that. So in order for not making them office people sitting in front of a computer, which was what they wanted to avoid, we need to do something that makes it easy for them to input and makes it simple, right? So this is from my mock-up. So the first one was really, we have some wraps that needs to be welded together, and then we have a section. And then when the section is done, it gets transported to the site where the mill is erected, and then they are put together and form a full tower, and then the windmill on top, and so on, right? But it's also very, very important that everything is documented, not only because they are ISO certified, but because if you erect a windmill tower in the North Sea, you don't want to be forced to put it down because something went wrong or a welding was not done correctly, or the painting is breaking off, because you can't go in the middle of the North Sea and just paint over that scratch, right? So there's so much going on there, and as well with their quality control. So that's why documentation is really important. Also because I don't know how much it costs to take down a windmill in the middle of the North Sea, bring it onshore and fix it. But I guess it would be extremely expensive. So who should pay that bill? That's why the documentation needs to be completely in order. So every of these wraps has a bunch of processes that they need to go through. And you could divide it into different types of processes, and within each process, there's process steps, right? But instead of giving them a spreadsheet or something like that, why not make it visually? Saying, okay, which section am I talking about? Which wrap of the section? Because the sections, the wraps are not the same. They are conic, yeah. So they are round, but they are getting smaller at the top, right? So each of the wrap needs to be in a precise location of the section, right? So my idea was to divide in a map here the processes, the main processes of this, and then of course nothing is simple. So some of the wraps have more processes than the other ones. Okay, but we can do this, and this is just an SVG. Well, it's just a drawing that we turned into SVG because that's something we can work with. So the idea was to say, hey, dear welder, you get an iPad and look at the drawing and press the section or the wrap and the process that you are going to enter some information about. And that's it. So that's basically the idea here. But it gets much more visual and much more relatable for the people who are working with it. And again, mind that they are workers, not office people. All right. So should we look at it? Yeah, sure. All right. Huh? So, let me see. Zoom a little bit. All right. So, yeah, there is a list. They start on a list and say, okay, what is the tower? And this is a top section. But now we are clicking in here. And the great thing now is that I said SVG was scalable vector graphic. It's screen vector graphic. But it's scalable, which means that we can scale it up and down, right? So what do we need to do on this section? It's pretty simple to see, right? And the good thing is that this web viewer we can display on a big screen for the manager's room, and everyone can see, okay, how are things going? Because everything comes from FileMaker, right? So there are some basic processes, and then as you can know, so this example is great because there is basically the same number of processes on this one, but here we have different processes on the weldings between the webs here, because that's also process, and then there's some overhead processes and some QC and so on. I don't want to bore you with that, but this is very visual, and everyone can see how's the progress going, and the guy who needs to find the steel plate that goes into wrap number 3, he can see, oh, they are already at, this one is already almost finished, so I need to find this steel plate, and we need to put it into the first process, and so on. So it's easy to follow along and see where are we in the process, what's the next step, and going on. And they are working 24/7. So when everyone meet in, they can see, oh, how far are we on this section and the next section, and so on, right? A little bit cool? Okay. And the great thing is that, yeah, like, of course there's a sequence where it's supposed to be, but I'm just clicking here, and so we have a step here, which is cutting of the plate. Here, I'm gonna prove that, yes, now I've put my, and it's not working now, for some reason. Okay, anyway, you get the point. This is plain FileMaker, so we know.
We keep saying to users, you need to use it.
Of course. Of course, but I'm sure. Okay, anyway, okay, now something happens here. Maybe it could be internet, right? Network. It is the internet. Something. Oh, it's almost Christmas, right? So these elves. Anyway, So as soon as we start doing steps in the process, we change the color here, so we can see, oh, someone is working on this. And I don't know if I dare to say that we have an error here. Let's see, it's hosted. Okay, anyway, if I report there's an error, okay, we changed the color. It's pretty slow. And now I can see there's something wrong here with this process. Someone has reported something, an error, and someone else needs to go in and fix it and verify that now it's fixed and so on. And then it can turn green. So green, orange, red, just like a traffic light. It makes sense to everyone. You don't need to explain it, right? It's immediately obvious what this is about, right? So here, still a web viewer. There's some embedded HTML here, and then I'm just taking a full HTML down here from a field, from a record, right? Simple enough. Let me see, and the magic happens here, basically in the script. So we have the creation of this script. Thanks. All right, let me just make it a little bit bigger, because this is not that complicated even. So basically we create this section that consists of a bunch of other related records, and that's why we are doing it on the server, because we need to look at different records that changes process. Okay, so we have a loop that is finding blah 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 and so on. So the fun thing about this map is, let's just have a look again at that. Hey, come on, there, right? So this wrap is just the same as this wrap, as this one. Okay, you get the point. So because I have this object described, I can copy it and just move it a little bit. The same with the rings in the middle. I have the object, I can just copy and move it around, which is what makes this SVG really beautiful. So we have three types of wraps, one with 4 processes, one with 5, and then one with 10. And then we can color, if it was only 8, then we can color it gray, the 2 last one. So that's what we went with. And basically, yeah, this looks like something I just showed before, right? So it's a path. It has some, it's a simple path here. The key here is transform. As you can see, there's a transform here where you can translate, and then I have the, is it easy enough to see? All right. So I have a merge code here saying I'm gonna replace this merge code X with a number. And that number is, how far do I want it? Is it wrap number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And then, of course, I've moved a little bit around and tested and see, okay, so I need to move it 10 or 100 or whatever value it is to move it to the next location. And when you have that in place, it's just making some calculations, right? So we have that for this one and so on, for the ring and the text and blah, blah, blah. And then we are just building it up in a loop, right? So we have the wraps here, we have some while, awesome, right? So we have a little bit of while, we have some script looping, we have some substitutes, all stuff that we know, right? So we are building the HTML here, and then we have the section. Okay, so what about the coloring? Yeah, the classes works in SVG. So I have 4 classes probably, red, orange, green, and white. Okay, so they are all white to begin with, and whenever I start a process, so it needs to change color to orange, or green, or red, I call the script pieces and saying, hey, this process needs to change color. So I'm taking the HTML, I'm saying what is the new color based on the status. I say, okay, is it white? Actually, that's one other thing that is nice with this CSS. You can just say red instead of a color code, right? And that makes it easier to read. So I'm just saying that, and then I'm gonna do a substitute in here with this. Looking in here and just do a substitute, which is dead simple, right? So that's the magic of this one. And as soon as I've done that, I put the full HTML into a field in the main record of the section. And of course, it's a big chunk of text, but it's not that bad, and it loads pretty okay. It's fairly simple. I could break it up in several blocks and load it from different records, but I just found that it was easier to keep it in the same and just grab it from there. No? Yes.
Is there a reason why you put it in a field and not a variable or a global variable? Because if you put it in a field, it hits the hard drive.
Yeah, but I need it for all the clients, right? So it's not that I generate it. I don't generate it on the fly. I generate the HTML whenever something changes. Otherwise, it's just a static HTML, basically. So that's the reason why I'm just keeping it in a field, just because it's easy to load from a field.
And that works with multiple users on the same system.
Yeah, because
Wow.
it's a piece of session that is making the changes. Otherwise, it's just displaying, right? All right. So, yeah, that was basically it. Any questions? Yeah?
Two things. First, I'd like to thank you, or Mangatak, for communicating so clearly. There are some people in here who have hearing problems, and this has been the best session for clarity for people like myself who do have a hearing problem. So thank you very much for that. Secondly, I'm assuming that the solution for the windmills finishes at the factory. When it's shipped out of the factory, your system, your process system stops and somebody takes over.
Yep.
So there's no offline requirement for that particular
Nope.
solution. Has anybody ever asked you whether you could take that? I mean, the minute you see an iPad, you know, I mean, I've welded under cars and that myself. And in the middle of the North Sea, there's no signal or anything like that.
But it's just FileMaker. So whatever you can do with FileMaker, you can do with this.
Yeah. So
because,
if you need it to sync later on, that's a different app, basically.
Because it's just simple HTML. I could use, style sheets that are hosted.
Yeah.
That would require a connection, right? Yeah. Actually, in the first example, I'm actually using for the icons just some frameworks that are hosted, which is totally not needed, but it was dead fast to do that, and it wasn't a problem.
And you've said it's simple so many times, just proves it isn't. Thank you again.
Yeah.
For the SVG web views, have you had to print or PDF them? Have you had any issues with that if you had?
Printing SVG in a PDF? Was that the question?
Yeah, so it's on a layout which you then save as PDF.
No.
Haven't done it or haven't had issues?
I haven't had issues. I have another project that is relying on printing SVGs, printing to a PDF, but no, I haven't.
Okay. We have one client that does it on the server, and we have to pause to allow it to render. So
Anything you print from a web viewer. Typically, you need to pause because it needs to load, right? So it depends on what you're loading in the web viewer, but you need to allow it to load. So yeah, that's pretty common, I think.
So just going back to the windmill that you were looking at there, I take it that if they actually want to put on more layers, that then's not a problem either. It just you can
No.
you just add them or take them off. Because I was kind of thinking, and it's the same with the room idea. You could do that with hidden objects,
Sure.
just on a layout.
Sure.
But if it does need to shift, if it does need to change, literally diameters, then that's when this kind of thing becomes really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's things you can do already with the HTML, and it's just a matter of layering them, the right layering, so that they don't go beneath the other one. So it's just about how you combine your text blocks. Right.
SVG expanding
Oh yeah.
for more layers on the actual windmill itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. It's also about layering in the text, and then it's about transform the X, right, or the Y.
Yeah.
In this case, it was only the X I needed, but then the Y axis. Yeah. All right. No more questions. We are finishing on time, almost on time. Thank you very much.